You want to be a better deck builder, whether that's building bracket 3s, upgrading precons, making CADH decks. You want to be able to build decks that you love playing, but obviously that's easier said than done. So I have discovered a way that works for me to build decks that not only make me a better deck builder, but also let me have the fun of brewing decks with only 10 cards. And so now how do I do this? The 10 card decks that I make are what I call mini decks, and their purpose is not to be played as much as they are to show me the foundation of what a commander can have. So what I do sometimes is I take a random commander, either going to a random commander website or getting the EDH Rec Commander of the day, and what I do is I take that commander and try to pick out the 10 foundation cards that I want with this commander. And what I mean by foundation cards is not 10 cards from the set of foundations, but rather 10 cards that will make up the game plan of this deck. And now before you start thinking of cards, a big rule of thumb for me is that there are no game changers and no what I call commander staples allowed in these 10 card mini decks. I personally want to break away from the auto-include style of thinking that a commander way of building can put our minds into. So no Farseeks, no Swords to Plowshare, no Birds of Paradise, no Smothering Tithe. The point of mini decks is to strip away the fluff of a commander deck and let you directly see the actual foundation and gameplay of a certain commander. And so while sure, there are certain scenarios like Tifa Lockhart that's going to take a auto-include card like Farseek and give it more of a value than just being a ramp spell, and it goes more into its game plan. And even after I build these mini decks, I might put a game changer like Rhystic Study or Smothering Tithe into them, but again, these are cards that are more auto-include-y and are not doing the goal of finding unique cards that just go into the specific commander for the mini deck. But now, to go all the way back to the start, why do I randomize the commander for this? Why don't I just look for a commander I like to build and make a 10 card mini deck around them? And this goes back to the other point of wanting to stay out of the auto-include style of deck building. I am someone who almost never builds Spellslinger, and while I do have some instances and days where I think it would be cool to build, I get turned off by the thought of building a 100 card deck that I end up hating. And so now, not only am I going to be finding 10 cards that are not auto-includes and I have to do some digging for, but now the game plan and the commander are something I also don't get to pick. So what the 10 card mini deck does is give me a more time efficient way to build an archetype I otherwise would never give the time of day. I get to look at a Spellslinger commander, start scrolling through Scryfall for synergy cards that would make up the foundation without filling out a full 100 card list. Now, I really want to break down the importance of finding the synergy for a specific commander. Let's take the commander Nahiri Forged in Fury for example. It has affinity for equipment, so it's going to get a -1 to its basic cost for each equipment that we control, and then whenever a equipped creature we control attacks, we exile the top card of our library, we may play that card during this turn, and we can cast it for free if it is a equipment spell. And what you can do is sure, throw in 10 equipment cards for free and just say that it's your mini deck. But not only does this go against what the 10 card mini decks kind of stand for, but it actually kind of makes you a worse deck builder in the process. While sure, having a bunch of equipment spells on the board is going to make Nahiri cost less, what it's not going to do is fill out our board to get multiple triggers of Nahiri's effect. Nahiri is not a Voltron card that wants to do it on itself. What it does is want to go wide with multiple creatures that are equipped and swing out to get a whole bunch of cards in exile that we can play. So now going back to our original example, while some of these equipments might be good, they're not going into our game plan. In an average game, we would have 2 or 3 equipments out, get Nahiri out early, but have nothing to swing with to get its effect. So now we have to ask ourselves, how do we get our equipment onto creatures easier? And this is where the actual fun of the mini decks start, where we get stuff that auto-equip equipment onto our creatures, or we can find stuff like the Job Select mechanic from Final Fantasy. These are equipment cards that will enter and make a 1/1 token that are auto-equipped to it, going right into Nahiri, getting the cost reduction, and getting the bottom effect. And I can go into even more synergy things like Mirrodin kind of being the same thing, but I think you get the gist, that the more time you think about your commander and the more time you put into picking out these 10 cards, the more value you're going to get out of it. And so now once I have this 10 card mini deck, I get to decide if I want to build it out and see where it takes me, or if I end up not building it. And while sure, it still sucks where you find a 10 card deck that you end up not liking, I'd say that finding 10 cards over a full 99 is much more time efficient. But I would argue that there's even value in mini decks even when you don't end up building the deck afterwards. I personally have a page where I keep a full list of all of the mini decks that I make, and this really helps me whenever it comes to actually building decks in the future. Let's say I wanted to make a Gwen that flips into Ghost Spider deck, which cares about casting things from exile. Of course, I'm going to be looking at staples like Jessica's Will, but now instead of starting from scratch, depending on what mini decks I have made, I might already have some unique ideas for how I want to take the deck without even needing to look at any cards. I could look at my Nahiri mini deck since that card cares about casting stuff from exile, and find some synergy pieces that I have in that to maybe reduce the spell from cards I cast from exile. But even if I built a mini deck around, let's say, Kellen the Kid, which doesn't care about necessarily casting things from exile, but does care about casting stuff from outside of my hand, I could find interesting stuff that I put into a Kellen mini deck like the Foretell mechanic, which will let me put a card into exile and cast it later, still triggering Ghost Spider. So I'm sure that you can see the value of just having these mini decks around if you are a chronic deck builder like me. Building decks to me is all about finding those niche cards that only work in a specific deck. I don't really care about adding in the Soul Rings or the Path to Exiles. I'm a lot more interested in the cards that define a deck as itself and unique. And I'm really only doing this for bracket 2 to 3, so I'd be really interested to see if anyone can make this method work in high-powered CEDH list whenever it comes to building mini decks. But I do really think that this is something that if you just love deck building, will save you not only time, but will make you a better deck builder in the process.